In this video, I'm going to be showing you the basics of flippity manipulatives and giving you some examples of how to use flippity manipulatives in your class. So I initially thought of these as fridge magnets because I've had a couple sets of those just word magnets that students could use to put sentences together, and so in my head that's kind of what these are. But there's so much more that you can do with the flippity manipulatives. In fact, I had so many examples that I ended up putting them all together on a Wakelet so that there was a visual and a link for each one of them, along with the explanation of kind of what its purpose is. So I'm going to show you how some of these work. The thumbnail image that you see there is what a finished student screen might look like, but when you click on it, that will take you to the actual manipulatives activity, and I'll have the link for this Wakelet in the description so that you can actually play around with these if you want to. So the first one I'm going to show you is question construction, and question construction I use with my beginning level students when we were practicing learning how to put together questions. And you'll notice that I have lots of different colors here of cards. That is intentional because if students are putting together their question correctly, they should be doing it in rainbow order. So if I start with L, étudier le français, pourquoi, and then they need to remember to punctuate, so they actually have to put a question mark at the end. She studies French. Why? One way of putting together questions in French is that the question word goes at the end. And so students could move these little cards around as much as they want to practice putting together questions. If you wanted to have students submit evidence of actually doing this work, then you could just have them take screenshots on their device and then send you those screenshots somehow. So basically, these are word cards on a background. There's a little gear in the lower right hand corner. Gear always stands for settings. And so there are some different options here. So this white fridge is the background that we are currently on. There are actually a whole bunch of other different backgrounds that students could use. Now, some of them might be confusing with this setup, but if they like the idea of doing it on a table, there's a wood grain background. There's also a more modern stainless steel background. I've done some geography activities with this where they could do a world background. So there are all of those different options as well as some others that we'll see later. Depending on how many cards you have, you might want those words to be bigger or smaller. Now, after we've moved, if you try to change the size, it's going to give you a warning that says like, hey, stuff might move on you. Okay. So here I made them a little bit bigger. They're really big, so that doesn't give me as much space to play around with them. When I make them smaller, I could make them as small as I need to in order to have the space that I need, or as big as I need to so that I can read them clearly. And then if, let's say, a student has put together some sentences and they want to start over, they can just click reset and it'll put everything down toward the bottom where they started. So that's kind of the basics of what this looks like on the student end. So this one was for practicing question formation or sentence formation. A couple other things that I've done that are similar to that. This is a sentence scramble activity. And so for these, again, the terms are color coded, but their task is they need to pick out one color at a time and they have to put the sentence together. So I'm going to pick out all of the red cards and just bring those up to the top. And then this makes a sentence. So I would probably have students do this with partners. They would have to figure out, okay, well, je and écrit are going to go together. J'écris, okay, cette carte de vœux, that makes sense. À mes grands-parents, I write this greeting card to my grandparents. And then there was a follow-up task in this where students had to identify the indirect object and maybe the direct object as well and replace them with object pronouns. But once I use the red one, I can just move them down, or I could do the reset and then, okay, now I'm going to work on the orange sentence. So I'm going to pull up all of the orange cards and do the same thing. So this is a little sentence scramble activity that in the past I would have done with each of these phrases written on its own little card, and you had a million little cards flying around the room and some would inevitably end up on the floor. And this is just a whole lot easier system for that activity. So this is a sentence scramble. This is a little intro activity that I do with my students at the very beginning of the year when they do not know me very well at all. I am Madame Nichols. There is another French teacher in my school, Madame G or Madame Guetchel, and my students are trying to figure out which of these sentences applies to me, applies to Madame G, or maybe applies to both of us. So this one has a different background. Now you'll notice if I go to my settings here, it says Venn diagram rather than the white fridge that we saw for the last one, and they actually can't change it. Venn diagram is the only background because I, as the teacher, deleted the other options. So this is the only background that they see, and they just need to decide, okay, who lives where, and well, they're both French teachers, so I'm going to put this one in the middle, obviously. Well, I don't see anything else about eye colors. They must both have blue eyes, etc., and try to fill out the Venn diagram as accurately as they can. Kind of a similar activity. We do this also at the beginning of the year. I do this with my students who are new to me to kind of see like how confident are they in their knowledge. And so I have 3 title cards here. I've got Je ne sais pas, and Je sais, and Je ne suis pas sûre. So Je sais means I know. Je ne sais pas is I don't know, and je ne suis pas sûre, I'm not sure, like I'm not certain. And so I just ask students to look at these words. All of these are little bitty but important words that come up a lot, and I just ask them to categorize. So when you look at a word, you definitely know what that means right away. Put it in the je sais. When you look at something, are you just kind of lost and you have no idea what that means? Put it in the je ne sais pas. Or when you look at something, are you like, I think I have a guess of what this means, but I wouldn't want to like bet money on it, and put it in the je ne suis pas sûre. And so I have students do this individually, and then I have them compare screens with someone around them. And while they're working on it, I can walk around the classroom, and it's a really quick and easy visual of which column has the most words in it. Are the green columns pretty full, or are there a lot in the yellow, or hopefully not a lot in the red? So once again, this is a different background. This is the 3-column background, and once again, this is the only option that students have because that's how I've set this task up for them. I've got another activity that's kind of similar. It's another 3-column activity. And for this one, I was introducing the concept of gender with geographic names and leading into prepositions with geographic names. I'm going to make the words a little bit bigger before we start. There we go. And so I had asked them to use these titles, pays masculin, pays féminin, and then this question mark for the middle. And so they need to decide, well, which ones are feminine countries and which ones are masculine countries, and which ones do I maybe not know what to do with. And we would sort out those terms, and we would talk about how would you know that something is feminine? How would you know that something is masculine? And what about these ones that you're not sure of? So besides the places that don't have an article, maybe they would look at l'Algérie and go, well, I think it might be feminine, but I don't really know for sure. So we would talk about those. So this was an introduction activity. And once again, students could do this individually on their own device, but then they could also compare screens with their partner. One thing that's important to understand with Flippity is when students open the link that you share with them, they are opening it up brand new, fresh every time that link is clicked. So what one student does on Flippity does not affect anyone else whatsoever. Every student is getting their own screen to work on. We had seen a Venn diagram before. Here's just another use of a Venn diagram. It stretches a little bit on my computer just because the screen is set up a little bit differently. We had talked about Independence Day in the United States versus La Fête Nationale, national holiday in France. And so as prep for a speaking activity, I provided all of these terms and then I asked students to move them. So they would put the French flag on one side, the American flag on the other side, and then they would categorize the rest of the terms. Do they feel that it fits better with France or with the United States? Or maybe is it something that applies to both, like fireworks? So once they had their Venn diagram set up, then that led into a speaking activity, and they could use this as their notes. Now you'll notice that in addition to words, I also have some images here. I'm not going to talk about images in this video, but I will be doing a different video where I show you how to use images as your terms in Flippity, because that's an awesome use of this resource. So this Wakelet just has lots of different ways that you can use Flippity. One more that I'm going to show you just because I love this. In our French 3 class, we had watched a video and then we were using that video to practice passé composé versus imparfait, the two past tenses in French. If you are maybe a Spanish teacher, in Spanish it's the pretérito and the imperfecto. So same idea. So first what I had students do was they were going to sort the sentences into the two categories of information versus events. So just something that was a piece of information, like Lulu was 9 years old, versus an event like Felix made fun of her. So they would categorize those and sort them into the different columns. And then once they had everything categorized, then we talked about, can you put the information things in order? Can you put them in sequence? Well, not really, because Lulu was 9 years old the whole time. Her stuffed animal was a fox the entire time. That didn't really change throughout the story. But the things that were events in the story, yeah, those have a specific sequence. And so the events then, after we just categorize them and put them in information versus events or description versus action, then we said, okay, now what was the sequence in which these happened? And so we talked about how you can sequence events that use the passé composé. You can't really sequence necessarily things that use the imparfait because they're kind of ongoing in the background. So this was kind of a two-part activity. First, we split into two categories, and then within this category, we sequence them in order. So the Wakelet that I have here, again, has a whole bunch of different ideas, and you can see like what the students would end up creating in the end. So going back to the Flippity website, the manipulatives is right here. Just like everything else, there's a demo that shows you how it works. You have the instructions that shows you to modify the template, publish your spreadsheet, get the link, bookmark and share, just like we do for every other Flippity. And then you have the template here. So when we click on that, it's going to ask if we want to make a copy. Yes, we do. And we're going to start with this blank doc. So they had used some of the characters from The Office for theirs, and then a couple random adjectives as well. So I'm going to delete all of the information that is in the white boxes, and that's where I'm going to type the terms that I'm going to use. Now you saw on several of mine that I had my terms color coded. So color coding is super easy to do. All you have to do is type the color there. Any basic color, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, etc. will work. You can also use hex codes and things like that. Those will function as well. When you have your information typed in, you're going to want to go to backgrounds and decide what you want to use. So if you don't really care what the background is, you can leave all of these in here. But if you decide, okay, my students would really get distracted by that world background, I don't want that to even be an option. Notice how I just clicked on the row number. I clicked on the 16. I'm going to right click and delete row. Now that is no longer an option. If I decide that this is going to be like a word magnet kind of thing, and I just want to have the blank backgrounds, I'm just going to choose all of these. Notice that I started over here on the row side, not just the white boxes, but I started, so I'm actually highlighting the entire row. Oh, we can leave the wood grain. Let me redo this one. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go down through here. I'm going to delete anything that has like lines in it. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to delete all of those rows. It'll condense this together, and now my students will only have these 4 options. So fridge, grain, steel, corkboard. Those are the options they have. Corkboard was not an option in some of the Flippities that I had because this has been added since then. So Flippity is constantly adding new things. If I decide instead that I want one specific background for them to use, and it's not the white fridge, I want them to have a Venn diagram background, I'm going to delete everything up until the one I want them to use. So same thing, I highlighted the rows, right click, and I'm going to delete those rows. And then I'm going to delete everything after the same way. So now Venn diagram is the only background that is going to show up. They don't have any choices and they don't have to get to it at all. There are some other options here. So the display is random. If you wanted the words to come up in the order in which you put them, you could do that. But I think kind of the whole point of Manipulatives is random. And you can choose your font. So there are 4 basic fonts. Doesn't really matter. I personally like the look of Poppins, so I'm probably going to change it to that font. Just like any other Flippity device then, I'm of course going to give my Flippity a name. I'm going to change where it says Manipulatives. I'm going to rename that to something else that is more specific to whatever my task is. And then I'm going to go up to File and Publish to the Web. So once I click on Publish and I click OK, it's going to give me this link. This is not the link I want to use. I'm going to go to get the link here. This link isn't really going to do anything right now because I didn't put any text in my actual thing, so nothing would show up, but we know that that's where we're going to get the link, and that's what we would save for our use or to share with students. So that's a quick overview of lots of different ways that you can use Flippity Manipulatives.